Welcome everybody to the Internet Society Foundation board meeting. This is our 20th board meeting. Uh, Thanks everybody for being here, either in person or remotely. We appreciate the attention. Our first question is, are there any declaration of conflicts that people need to note for today's meeting? Seeing none, I think we're ready to go on with the agenda as presented. Sarah, would you like to walk us through the Executive Director's report?
I certainly would. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for being here. As always, it is a genuine pleasure for me to share what it is that we're doing at the foundation since we last saw one another. And that, of course, was in November. And as you know, this has been a terribly busy quarter plus for us because of reallocation. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different things with, of course, kicking off with the reallocation. My guess is that for many of you, that is top of mind at the moment. How is it going? Several of you have asked me since I arrived. The short answer is it's going. It's definitely going. There are some things I would say we want to celebrate. And I would also say there are some things that have been more challenging than we anticipated, but we're making them work. And that's what we're all about. So today we'll start with the update, on reallocation. Then I'll speak about program highlights. And of course, our programs right now are falling into two categories. One is reallocated programs, those that came over from ISOC, but the other ones are what we consider to be our core programs. And those are the ones with which you're familiar. Although I do believe there was a comment yesterday about not always knowing what some of the programs were doing. So I will remind people of some of those details when we get to that. I'll also talk with you about some other things that are happening or have happened in Q1, since, believe it or not, 2 days ago, Q1 ended. Can't believe that. Also talking about expanding the team. As you'll recall, we did ask for additional headcount, and we have been able to secure some of that in the first quarter. And then, of course, I want to talk about where we're going to go for Q2. So let's begin, as I mentioned, with the reallocation update. So just as a reminder, we're not quite there yet. I'm just going to stay on that slide. Thanks, you guys. I'll let you know. I appreciate it. As you know, we were asked in the kind of second half of 2022 to consider doing many things differently with the foundation. And when I say many, it's because for us, it was a bit of a change compared to the way in which the foundation was originally set up. So what we were asked to do was to consider how best for us to move departments from ISOC into the foundation to make us more than just a philanthropic organization. You know the reasons for which we did this. And it's been great working together with Renaya and the different departments. I must say, it's been a true pleasure for me and a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to get to know her better, but also many other people who were at ISOC. The other thing we were asked to do, which was probably even more significant from my team's standpoint, was to take on ISOC programs. ISOC for many years, as I think you all know, had been doing programs where they were providing funding in different ways to different types of people and organizations. And Andrew and those of us on the MSG, which is known as the Managerial Steering Committee Group, felt that it was time, because of the expertise that the philanthropy team in the reallocated in the foundation, original foundation, we really have the know-how of what the best practices are for how to do any type of funding program. And I do not restrict that to just grant programs. We're talking about funding in general, which includes sponsorships and other types of things. So we were asked to please stop, take a look at those programs and see what we could do to move them over. So that's just a reminder of what it was that was being asked of us by ISOC to make the foundation a supporting organization as strong as it could be, doing what we do best, particularly in the philanthropy area. So you'll hear me use that word philanthropy a lot in this discussion. And that's because we really are no longer just the foundation, right? The foundation has additional departments in it. So it's a bigger place and it's doing more than just philanthropy. As you know, it's doing empowerment. it's doing fundraising, and it's doing communications and marketing for the Internet Society. So those are all now part of our partnerships, and we work very well together, and we're getting to know one another quite well because we've had to work a lot together, doing a lot of different things. So let's go to the next slide, please. What's happened? Well, as I mentioned, there have been some challenges, but there's also a lot to celebrate. We had an opportunity here to get educated by the ISOC staff about what these programs were. While we were familiar with some, we really were not familiar with all of the programs that we're moving over. And they, on the other hand, were learning from us about philanthropy and what best practices were for providing funding to individuals and to organizations. So it's been a real exchange of ideas. Sally runs a really tight team, and she and I are in touch regularly because it's very important that we make sure that we stick together on how things are being done. And there have been challenges that she and I've had to work out. We've had some issues where we've asked for certain requirements because they're best practices in philanthropy, and it's new to people. So they're not resisting it, but it's new. So that's been a lot of what we've been doing here, is working together to explain to people why certain things were established in this industry and why they should apply to these programs as they move over. The good news is we've already launched 3 new reallocated programs: Connecting the Unconnected, which some of you may know is community networks. We launched that in February. We also launched Sustainable Technical Communities in February. And we launched Sustainable Peering and Interconnection is the name of that program, and that you probably all know well as IXPs. That launched just, a week ago, so very recently. And you can see that these 3 programs were ISOC programs. They're now foundation programs, and they're out there, and they're following best practices. In each one of these cases, we do have both internal and external reviewers, because you'll recall that that objectivity, that transparency has been extremely important to us with our core programs. So we were not going to not do that with these programs. So again, that's been a challenge to determine who those people should be. But the other thing, and I'll talk more about this when I speak about our operations side, is we've had to now develop profiles in our grants management system for all of these people, because you cannot work in Flux unless you have permission to work in Flux. And you may work in Flux as a reviewer, you may work in Flux as a grantee, you may work in Flux as a staff, an employee. I have access to everything. The different categories have access to different things, but they all have access to what they need to apply. And these people are having to learn to do things differently. And when we get to another slide, I'm going to explain to you what exactly it is that I mean by that. Manners is going to be launching this week, 4th of April. So we will have, within the next few days, 4 of the programs, reallocated programs, launched to date through the foundation in Flux. Now, I will make note, there are a couple of programs, actually 3 or 4, that we're struggling with right now on requirements. And we do need to still work with them to see if we can make them work in Flux. It may not be possible to do it in this year. We're going to do the best we can. We'll make adjustments as we can. If we have to, we do the work in the fall, in the 4th quarter, and we launch them in 2024. So that will be something that we'll keep you posted on. But these 4, as I mentioned, have started. Next slide, please. So in addition to having the programs move over, we also, of course, had to make changes to the website. The foundation is not just what the foundation was before. And again, I want to make sure everyone knows we're excited about this. But it was some additional work because, as Andrew pointed out earlier in his discussion, this was all to be done by the 1st of the year. We managed to get most of it up. Some of the other stuff we a little bit late on, but we did get it all done in Q1, which is really exciting. So the 2 things I have here in pictures, one is the funding areas web page. Anyone who's spent any time on the Internet Society Foundation website will see that we have a funding areas web page. And what that does is, on the dropdown, it shows all the different programs for which you can apply for funding. And it's intentionally called funding because, as I mentioned, some of the work are grants, some of the works are other things, but they are an exchange of funds. So we have that list, and as you can see, it's not complete on the picture, but you can see we've added the new programs. And the way in which this works is if someone comes to the foundation site and they click on one of the reallocated programs, they will be taken to the ISOC website. Why is that important? That's important because the people who have been applying for these grants, these funding opportunities, are used to going to the ISOC website. So myself, working with some of Renaya's other staff members, James and Christy, I think you're going to hear from Christy later. We made a very conscious decision, along with the communications senior director who works with me is Mabel. I made a decision that made the most sense. But what we did do is we redesigned those pages. And if you have a chance to go on ISOC's site, you can see this. We developed a template, and each one of the programs had to go ahead and fill out that template. So the right information was on each of the pages, the objectives, the criteria, how things are selected, what the open period is. And then every one of those pages has an Apply Now button on it. And when you push that button, you are immediately taken to the grantee portal in Flux. So we have set all of this up, making it as easy as possible, because this is an adjustment for these audiences. They used to call people at ISOC and have discussions about their projects. We've changed that. We've changed that whole thing all around, which is what everybody asked us to do. And it's going to take a little time. But I will say we do have applications for all the programs. Yes, Ted.
Just a quick question. How do people react to Flux itself as the branding? Do they see it as a joint branding of ISOC and the ISOC Foundation? Do they see it as an ISOC Foundation branding? Do they not really see it in branding terms?
I think it depends on the person. I would say some probably look at it as no branding at all. Just this is the way I know that I can apply for my funding. And then other people probably still are comfortable having it be an ISOC tool. But others are starting to understand that Foundation is a supporting organization for ISOC. So to be working with us on the Foundation Flux grants management system is not something that's really a major change. But it's a good question. Other questions since I paused right there? Okay. And just anytime, jump in, because I want this to be as engaging as possible. Yes.
Sarah, we are about to change the member Nova system to Fantiva. So do you have any plans of joining two systems somewhere together in the future?
Oh my goodness, yes, we do. Absolutely. With Fantiva, I don't think we have a presentation on the status of that now, but I know you heard from Lauren at one of our informal calls. They're working very hard on delivering on time, and there will be a data migration, Mohammed, for us, and it's scheduled right now for June. So any of the programs that were in Member Nova are going to be moved over to Flux. But there's going to be a period where there's just going to be this whole integration thing that's a little bit above my technical know-how, but Andre and his team know it for sure, as does my director of operations. So they'll work very closely together because that has to happen. There's certain things that are going to be in Fantiva that we need to have access to in Flux as well, and vice versa. Yep, absolutely. The other change I just want to point out for you here is that we have the philanthropy team now, okay? So what used to just be the foundation team is one of 3 different tabs that you will find when you go to our team page. Philanthropy team includes everyone who is on my team, who works in philanthropy, who works in grant and funding giving. And then there's also a tab for the new departments that have moved over with Renaya, the communications, along with the fundraising and with empowerment. So those now, if you went to that middle tab that's on there, you'll see the faces of all of those people and the bios of those people on those teams. And the final tab that we have now is leadership and administration. And that again, too, you'll see the new bios, you know, it's the same people you already know, but who used to be featured on ISOC in some cases are now featured on the foundation website. Next slide, please. So I've just given you an overview of reallocation and what it's been like from our standpoint, at least from the program side. I'm going to talk now about what we consider our core programs. I may end up changing this term. Right now, I'm using it because it kind of helps us understand what the buckets are. You all are familiar with these names. I'm happy to tell you a little bit more again about what some of them do, because I know that that's helpful to be reminded. But these programs right now that I'd like to update you on are Skills, BOLT, Resiliency, Research, Beyond the Net, and IGF, both national, regional, and global, as well as the Schools of Internet Governance. Next slide, please. So, Skills. This program stands for Strengthening Communities, Improving Lives and Livelihoods. This was an acronym I came up with in the middle of the night, scribbled on a hotel pad before I went back to sleep. You all know how that goes. I wanted something that said skills. Why? Because this program is targeted to people who are already connected. But the question is, are they using that internet connection to its greatest capacity? And so we purposefully developed this program mainly focused on education and on economic growth opportunities. So we started the launch of this program in 2021, or excuse me, 2022. Oh, no, 2021. Yeah. And we have been building cohorts since then. We decided to run the program in just three countries, in Bangladesh, in Colombia, and also in Senegal. So what you see here are some photographs from a site visit that we took to Senegal at the end of November, beginning of December last year. And this was intentional because part of the way in which we know if our programs are working is to go and see it. It's not just about receiving the reports, which has to happen. And we will not, in fact, give additional payments unless you give us the report. And I know there are people here in this room that are familiar with that requirement. So we like to get those reports, and we have our monitoring, evaluation, and learning people comb through those to make sure that they're meeting KPIs, or if they're not, why they're not. But site visits add an incredible element. It is our opportunity to see things face to face and not just speak with our grantees, but really importantly, to also speak with the beneficiaries, the people who are getting the benefit of the funding that we are providing. So we visited with 5 different grantees, as well as the ISOC Senegal chapter. And this is not only beneficial for us because we learn more, but what's really important is it also starts to build a collaboration among our grantees in that country. It is so impressive to watch them share information with one another and learn from one another. It's really one of the most exciting things I have ever seen. And that, as I think you know, when I started my vision for this foundation, having us be known as a collaborative, community-driven foundation was extremely important to me. So that's what we did in Senegal. And I will tell you, we even had a very interesting meeting. One of the mayors of one of the towns in which we're working asked us to please come and meet with his staff and discuss what it was that we were doing. I found that to be so rewarding because it just shows that the partnerships that we're establishing go beyond just the grantees and the beneficiaries, but even the officials in some of these places really want to be part of this. And I thought that was great. Next slide, please. So in addition to Skills Senegal and Skills Bangladesh and Skills Colombia, we are now preparing for a second cohort in those 3 countries, but we're also expanding to 3 new countries, Brazil, Ghana, and Indonesia. These will all be part of the call for applications, which is going out in May. And I will tell you that we're very excited about working in these additional countries, but I also want to say that we did just have an amazing trip to Bangladesh. took place just last week. The people who went over just got back, so they're really tired right now, for good reason. And they visited with 6 different grantees, as well as the ISOC chapter in Bangladesh. And one of the things that they reported back to me that was so rewarding is they had all of the grantees, including the chapter, in one room. And when they were together, they started sharing resources with one another. They were sharing names of consultants. They were sharing ideas. They were sharing everything. And again, this goes to that community building that we're very, very excited about. Luis, question, please.
Thanks, Sarah.
Uh-huh.
Do we have some sort of a map where grantees are located?
I didn't put that in this presentation, but we're in 56 countries.
Yes.
That map is pretty busy right now, and it's on our website.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
We're in a lot of places. Part of why we have spread out, first of all, chapters, because we're funding so many chapters. So that obviously is going to give us a lot.
Which percentage of chapters get funded in
Oh, boy.
apart from the admin fund?
This was something I know, John, we talked about at the advisory committee. You know, Luis, let me get back to you on that number. It's going up, which is the good news. We had a period of time, and I put it to COVID. I think it really was so much about that, where we really weren't getting that many applications. But we've changed the rules.
Yeah,
And-
because also in the advisory, it was discussed the way that
Yes.
the essentially it's not saying no. It's just not getting proposals, enough
Right.
proposals. And then it was discussed if it was that the criteria was too strict, or it was just that people aren't proposing because they have no projects on their hands.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So it's just, again, it depends on the timing. It depends. We're doing so much more outreach. We join all of the regional phone calls now, and we really make a pitch for people applying. They're allowed to have up to 2 small and 1 large, which was not the case before. The costs for, or the funding for those have gone up to 5,000 each for small and to 50,000 for large. So as a result, people are starting to get a little more clever, and we're starting to get some really great applications. But yeah, I mean, the criteria is a little stiff, and it's stiff for a reason. It's beyond just having a bank account. And then it's also just that, God bless you, that people are still kind of getting used to the whole idea of doing projects on a bigger scale.
Thanks.
Yeah. Other questions, since we just took a pause? Okay. So let's, yes, Sagarita.
Yeah, hi. I'm just wondering, like now you said you have certain projects yet to be finished, and some projects were finished in their first phase, right? So the projects which was finished their first phase, have we evaluated the impact on that, the funding or grantee, or and
Yes.
before we are going to fund them for the next phase?
Very good question. And in fact, what we did last year was, rather than do a call for applications, because we wanted to get better prepared for expanding the program, plus we were really starting to get involved in reallocation. So we put skills on hold in terms of getting new grantees, but we did renew 5 grantees. The reason I'm using that as an example is they would not have been renewed had they not demonstrated to us in their reports, or in some cases through a site visit, that they had done with the funds what they said they were going to do. We had to see that first. We also work with Say's team, and we do what we call a review, where we gather a bunch of receipts and we put our grantees through a little bit of work, but it shows us that the money was spent the way they said the money was going to be spent. So we are very, very rigorous about any renewals that we do. And then to answer your question a little bit more fully, we have our monitoring, evaluation, and learning team really, as I mentioned earlier, combing through these reports to make sure that things are being accomplished. Yeah. And if they're not, one of the things that we do is we work with them to try to help them understand how might we take it to the next level. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
So you talked about renewing the 5 of the grantees.
Mhm.
Is this renewal entails to the same projects, or the indicators for the success or the achievements that you have the grants renewed for, they are different?
No, it's all part of the same package, Mohammed, really, that we look at all of those different things before we make a decision about renewals. And it actually came from the board that we should be thinking more often about renewals. For the beginning, we were looking at a start and a stop for everybody. And then we were realizing they really weren't able to get everything done in a short period of time. And if we were able to renew the grant, provide additional funding, and give them more guidance and more what I would call hand holding, but in a positive way, that was what we were able to do to determine that this was a good investment of our time. Okay. So I've talked about reallocated programs, which we're excited about, and then skills, just going to keep going. But interrupt me, as I said. Okay, next slide, please. I'm pushing here to move the slides. Okay, BOLT. This is building opportunities, leveraging technology. This is about innovative ways of getting connected. The first bullet I want to put out up there is a bullet about one of our older grantees called Project Waves. So this was not one that we awarded in 2022, but in 2021. The reason I included this, and there, yes, that is me up there in the sky with Shana, who is the programs director, fantastic at her job. We went to this project, did a site visit, saw what they were doing. Everything was great for this $325,000 grant. Well, guess what? The Maryland Broadband Company found out about the work that was being done. They went and did an assessment of the work that we funded, and they gave them an additional $3.1 million to expand this grant throughout Baltimore. They're working with vulnerable populations. We're at 500 with our grantees, so with our grant, so gosh knows what we'll get with 3.1 million more. But this is a victory for me to know that the work that we're doing and funding is impressive enough that someone would take a $325,000 investment, and I don't know how many, somebody do the math, that's a big jump. And I love that story. I also loved being up there on the, I don't have a problem with heights. So for me, this was great. I loved it up there. So as I said, they're going to use that to expand the successful work. And so that's Project Waves from 2021. And then we also have 4 new BOLT grantees that we announced. To get details on all of these different grantees, you can certainly go to our website. I don't want to take a ton of time going through what each of these programs is focused on, but I can tell you that these 4 that are listed here are all about $200,000 grants. In most cases, they're a year long. I can tell you the Student Freedom Initiative, which works with historically Black colleges and universities, is being sponsored, fiscally sponsored by Connect Humanity. And I'll talk some more about that organization later this afternoon. Next slide, please. In addition to skills and BOLT, we have resiliency. And what you might recall about this program that was so important was that we were not looking at going in when a disaster hit. This is called resiliency because this is a program that we wanted to make sure to use to make sure that communities would be ready, not if, but when a natural disaster hit. So we announced 3 new resiliency grantees in 2022, announced them actually since I last saw you, which is why they're on this slide. You can see the 3 names up there. They're all roughly $500,000 grants, which is what we provide for resiliency. And then even though this program is focused on this type of thing where we train and we get people ready, and I'm going to give you an example in a second, we did want to say that our 2021 resiliency grantees were all in Turkey and northern Syria within 72 hours of the earthquake striking. This just shows the type, the quality of the grantees with whom we're working. TSF is one, Téléconférence Sans Frontières, also NetHope, and also Help NGO. So those were three of the resiliency grantees that were there. And I have to say, I was quite proud. And what's really cool is that they actually worked with the chapters in these countries as well to explain to them how it was that they did what they did to help be there as an education resource. So I don't know how everybody else feels, but I think that's pretty cool. And there's a tweet on the right-hand side of the screen that came from Help NGO, one of the organizations that was there in Turkey and northern Syria. So speaking of resiliency, next slide, please. Let's keep going here. I'm trying not to give you too much information, but I guess it's pretty obvious we're doing a lot here. So thank you for your patience. We did take a site visit to Guatemala. This was NetHope, as I mentioned earlier, one of our grantees for resiliency. And they were down there training the three chapters in that area, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica, and also some other players in this space of needing to know how to be prepared for disasters before they happen. What they do is a lot of training, and I don't mean just like a little bit of training. I actually sat through a few days of this. They teach you how to build cables, how to hook up solar panels, how to charge solar panels, how to do everything. But what's really cool about this program here with NetHope and what they do is, in addition to what they do with the training, they also bring equipment in for the training, buy more equipment with the funding, and they leave it behind in the country. So when the disaster hits, that country is ready. They are trained. And what NetHope generally does is work with a partner organization that has a good presence on the ground. In this case, in Guatemala, it's Save the Children. Save the Children will store the equipment and make sure it's maintained and make sure it gets to where it needs to go when the disaster hits. And the final thing I'd like to say about this is that both Nicaragua and Guatemala are now applying for Beyond the Net grants through Beyond the Net program. And they're doing this because they really want to do their own training, which I thought was pretty cool. Next slide, please. So research, okay, I know, so many programs. These are all our core programs, and now we have even more. And do you remember there was a day where all I talked about was we were looking for a grants management system? And now look what we're doing here. So as I mentioned in an email to everybody, we went ahead and announced in the couple of months or a couple of weeks ago who we awarded grants to in 2022. And I'm just going to read a couple of questions that came out of that. Some of the things, remember, we have trustworthy internet, we have greening the internet, we have decolonizing the internet, and we have the internet economy. So those are our four, and Pepper will remember being at the very first meeting when we decided what the heck this research program should look like. And look what's happening now. So some of the questions: what are the capacity gaps hindering the utilization of the internet by government agencies in the effort to improve transparency and accountability in service delivery? Another question that came as one of the grantees: how can we decentralize digital information systems promoting decolonization of the internet in developing countries? So you can see there's a wide variety and really, really wonderful organizations. And I will say something that was also very cool from one of our 2021 grantees. This is a woman, an individual who we funded, and she worked with the Suboptic Association and put together a map of where all the different suboptic cables are, and was looking at the impact that they have on the environment and vice versa. So this is the type of variety that we're getting in this research program. And right now we're providing more funding through research than any other program. And George has a question.
Well, this is impressive. Do we have copies of the research that's being done, and do we make it available generally?
So of course, because we're still fairly new and some of the projects are as long as 2 years, our plan, George, is to put a web page up together so that what we will do is make sure everybody can see the studies in a nice, easy way and not have to go searching for them. So I'll let everybody know when that happens. Any other questions?
Just a clarifying question. When you say
Yes.
suboptic, you mean submarine optical?
Submarine optical, sorry.
Thanks.
Yes. And then finally, I just wanted to point out, we also funded a program with our grantee policy, and they were looking at non-English speakers online, and they put together this report and did a presentation for that in February of this year. And I did want to mention that we were part of that presentation and discussion. So that shows you the type of communications that comes out as a result of the work that we're doing. Next slide, please. I promise we're not too far from the end. Okay, beyond the net, we've talked about this a lot, so I'll just go ahead and go through this slide very quickly. We have already awarded $105,000 in Q1, these 2 large grants and 5 small grants. You can see which countries applied and were awarded. There's some highlights right there. And again, if you ever want to go on our site, we do presentations and announcements of the grantees that we give, so you can get more information. And then while I'm on Beyond the Net, I do want to mention very quickly that we have funded 1 IGF for the North American region. And we also will be funding the Global Forum in Japan in October, I think it is. I got that right. So IGF is alive and well. And so too is Beyond the Net Small and Beyond the Net Large. So any questions? Okay, I'm just going to keep going here. I'm still really excited and passionate about this. I guess that's obvious. So let's go to the next slide, please. So in addition to programs, we have what I call pillars. So in addition to programs, we have monitoring, evaluation, and learning, communications, and operations. And just very quickly, let me take you through where we are on those. Next slide, please. Monitoring, evaluation, and learning, we call MEL. So from now on, I'm going to use that acronym if that's okay with everybody, because otherwise it's a mouthful. They are, as I've mentioned throughout this presentation, very busy working with our grantees and making sure that they understand what it is that indicators are, how you can measure them, seeing if they're doing what we need to have them do, et cetera. Spending a lot of time reading the reports, participating in some cases in site visits, and really, really digging in. We had for a while a team of 2. We now have a team of 3. And I must say, I'm thrilled, really thrilled to know that, because this is a big job. So they're very busy. Next slide, please. Our communications department, as I mentioned, was a person of 1. That's Mabel. She had some contract support, but now she's working with 1 additional person. She's also working very closely with the team that also exists in the foundation, the CMC, Marketing, Communications, and Content. And the reason that's so important to have a relationship with them is because we help each other push these success stories out. We also had to work very closely together with the 2 website issues that I was referring to earlier, what's featured where, how to apply through ISOC, et cetera. So all that is done. And it's been very smooth, wonderful team of people, and it's really, really been a good collaboration. And in fact, we're working this, you'll hear from Jeff later today, but we are working to make sure that our communication strategies and fundraising strategies are in sync, and we have a regular team meeting going with that. And then I just want to point out accessibility, just so I want to make sure, since we were talking about that earlier, we are constantly looking at that and making sure all of our channels are accessible. And finally, just to show you some of the publicity that we've gotten, in addition to being really active with our newsletter and our social, we also were featured in this publication on the right, which was from one of our ER grantees, who was working or is still working with boot camps and broadband boot camps. And these are with Native American communities. So just another place where we've been featured in another grantee, of which we're quite proud. Next slide, please. Operations, I mentioned up front, this department is really all about, this pillar, excuse me, is really all about making sure Flux works. They've been very busy building out our Flux grants management system for these new different program areas with reallocation, but of course also doing what we need to have done with the programs that we consider core programs right now. You can see in a list in the 3rd bullet some of the things that they're doing. And these in particular have to do with legal. And I have to compliment Ilona for the real great commitment that she's made to helping us make sure that we're doing everything right in terms of due diligence, grant man. I know it's not been smooth on every single day, but we're getting there. And she's been wonderful and a big help with us because we really, with all this new stuff that's going on, just it's a good idea to do the checks and make sure you're doing everything right. And then we also, this goes to the question that was asked earlier, are working very closely with collaborative systems on migrations as the new AMS is established. So those are the pillars. Those are programs, communications, MEL, and operations. And a question from Ted.
Yeah, going back to Mel, you
Mhm.
have at the bottom that's a completed cycle 1 of 2023 learning huddles.
What is
For-
the learning
Yeah,
huddle?
and what's the scope of a learning huddle?
Okay, so a learning huddle is when we all get together and take a look at things like theories of change, and we take a look at all the things that we anticipated at a project level, a program level, and a foundation level. And during these learning huddles, we do one for each program every quarter. And what we do is look at how we feel like we are measuring up to what we wanted to achieve, not just what the projects want to achieve, but what the program wants to achieve, and ultimately what the foundation wants to achieve. So we call these learning huddles, they're very informal discussions where we go through all the things that we've learned, make sure we're still asking the right questions, that we're learning what we need to learn. So that's why we call it a learning huddle.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things I've really appreciated about the foundation from the beginning is the desire to share any of this kind of learning across the community that's been created by the different ones. So is there a mechanism to take what's learned out of a learning huddle and share that out with the community?
So it's been a combination of things. We have done a lot of presentations, for example, with the chapter calls, because that's an easy vehicle. We share some things in our newsletter, and that subscription has gone up quite significantly. And then we also are finding ways now to get more information out. We have so much more to share in terms of qualitative and quantitative information. So looking for different ways to do this. And then whenever we get our grantees together in phone calls, then we also share with them and have sometimes grantees make the presentation for us so that they can share with others what they've done to make it successful.
Thank you. Any other questions while we've got a pause going? Okay.
All right, we're almost there. Okay, next slide, please. So we have expanded the team as a result of the expansion in the work. Some of these are actually replacements. We have had a little turnover, and so these are not all new positions that have been filled. Some are new and some are, as I said, replacements, but I just wanted you to see that we are continuing to build the team. And if you go to that new tab that I showed you, you can see what the entire philanthropy team looks like now. And final slide, please. So what's coming up for the next quarter? Well, March, okay, technically it's in Q1, but wanted to just remind you that we did just launch a sustainable peering and interconnection. We did just have a site visit to Bangladesh. And then you can see in April, May, June, and July, some of the things that are coming up, the launches of some core programs as well as some of the others. And June is the target date right now for the AMS integration, which is why chapter admin is listed there. So with that, I would just like to say thank you. I know it's been a tremendous amount of information that I've just shared. I guess it's just safe to say that we've been busy and that we continue to feel very passionate, not just about seeing the foundation grow, but to see the reallocation successful. So I will take any additional questions, please.
Okay, two quick questions. One is working backwards. You had mentioned there was some turnover. How has that affected, like, have you found that has a big impact on you being able to continue the programs, or has it basically been manageable thus far? Wondering how that's affected the overall momentum. And the second question was just in general, there's a lot going on. And given the size of the team, do you feel that is there too much going on for effectiveness, or you feel like you're at that right balance between having just enough people with just enough programs to be able to actually keep the momentum going, given the amount of work this actually is? Those are my two questions.
And they're great questions. I will be honest, there are a few minutes or hours sometimes during the day where I'm feeling just a wee bit overwhelmed. The people who've been hired for this team are really good at what they do. And even when we've lost someone, the way in which they pulled together as a team to fill the gaps that are there is really incredible. It's not been easy, to be frank. The team is working extremely hard. And I'm finding ways, working with Renaya and HR, to make sure that people really feel that they are so appreciated, and doing everything I can as a manager who fortunately has had a lot of years in management to make people feel we're going to get through this and it's going to be successful. And I have to say, they all believe that. They all believe that. So, and then in terms, Victor, in size, in terms of the size of the team, I think what we're seeing right now is it's a lot, but we're anticipating a rhythm to be established. And once we feel that rhythm is established and our programs are launched and the standardization of applications and standardizations of reports and all those things are done, and the migration has happened with the AMS, you know, these are the huge hurdles that we have right now. We anticipate that we should be okay with the headcount that we've asked for. If we're not, trust me, we'll be back. Yeah.
Okay, so I have Luis and then George.
Thanks, Sarah, again. The first, congratulations.
Thank you.
This process of reallocating people, programs was challenging, and I think you're doing the right job. First, I want to know, how do people feel? From my point of view, what I read and what I see is people that getting encouraged because of the challenge to get these new tasks. Yes, and I feel also that the amount of people that have incorporated into the foundation also took the tasks in a very, let's say, more than optimistic, in a very active way. Yes, so and I haven't heard from chapters complaints, but the second question is I see from the last slide, well, the previous slide, that June will be the chapter admin fund
Yes.
migration. And that is challenging because if we look at the day-to-day operations of a chapter, they rely a lot on the chapter admin fund.
Yes,
So how do you see our level of preparedness for that? And the last question, sorry about those, so many questions.
It's
Yes,
okay.
it's about, okay, we have built, we're starting to maintain, yes, and I think it's time to incorporate formal research. Do we have had any formal research proposals on the projects we're doing, or we're still on the growing up and trying to level up? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so on your first question, how do people feel? People are very aware of the importance of doing this for the health of the Internet Society and for the health of the Internet Society Foundation. So people are behind it and people are doing it. And they are working together, not just with each other, but as I mentioned, an awful lot of new ISOC staff with whom we did not work before. And that is going. And I'm working towards getting it in more of a rhythm, but I am feeling very optimistic about it, in spite of the challenges. That I feel very good. And I feel a commitment, a real commitment to seeing it be successful. So that's the first question. The second, chapter admin funds. That's going to be interesting. The good news is we have some people on our team who really understand what data migration is all about and what that's going to be like. I've been in very close touch with the CE team because they are the ones who've been doing that. And our people who work with chapters regularly are going to be the ones who will also be administering the chapter admin program. So we're learning a lot about what it is that's required and what the different levels are and how chapters are evaluated and all that sort of thing. But that's going to be a learning curve for sure. It is on a number of different, levels. So I'm not worried. I know we'll overcome those challenges, but I think that's going to be a challenging transition, I guess I would call it. And then in terms of the research, where is the foundation today? Where do we want it to be? What have we learned? So far, as I mentioned, the MEL component has been our #1 way of judging whether or not we've been successful. But myself and Renaya, Say, and Alona actually have had a few conversations about where we think we want the foundation to go. And it may be that one of the things that we decide to do is implement some type of research to make some more determinations about what might make the most sense. Ted had mentioned earlier the idea of, do we keep the same programs, for example? If we do we keep grants at the same level? I mean, there are a whole bunch of things, and maybe we really need to do some more formal research to help us answer those questions.
George and then Mohammed.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, George.
To what extent are you decentralized as a group? We're just roughly, are you totally decentralized? And have you had a need, have you felt a need to re-centralize for any purpose, any piece of the operation?
And when you say decentralized in terms of where
Geographically,
the team is located,
yeah. Staff.
I had a vision when I started this foundation of working multiculturally. I was very fortunate to grow up working and living with different cultures, and that has always been extremely important to me. I feel that we can learn so much from other cultures. So my vision was to hire people in all kinds of different places. And COVID actually kind of in some ways helped that, because so many, I hate to say COVID helped anything, but it did allow us to find people who were comfortable working remotely. So we now have team members in Kenya, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Brazil, the Netherlands, Spain, Canada. I mean, we're everywhere. And then we have people in the States in different time zones. We're making it work. We actually get together 1 day a week for 1 hour, every single person. And we've just hired somebody from India who starts next month. So it's not easy, the time zones, but gosh, it's refreshing to learn perspectives from different parts of the world. So we're decentralized as heck. But so far it's working. And we do hope with site visits and other ways of getting together that we can see one another in person from time to time, because as a manager, that to me is something that's extremely important.
Mohammed?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. It's always a delight to listen to your presentations. 2 points, not specifically questions, for the consideration of you and your team. First, this research program, I really like this. I think this is something that Internet Society and the Society Foundation can build upon their projects, their future projects as well. So my suggestion there would be to, while you are doing this in a practical domain, to also try and think about ideas, how these can be inculcated in academic programs. For instance, the reports that you publish on the websites, some of those would be prepared in a way so that they go into academic journals, so that it makes an academic impact as well. I do understand the impact that we are making here in media, it's important, but if we are able to also give some input into the academic domain, it would be really great.
Thank you.
Second point relates to a person with disabilities. This research program, I'm not sure how would you do that. I leave it up to your judgment. but perhaps it would be good to start some research program or to do a research study that how this internet impacts, or so we just passed in the earlier session a resolution on accessibility. So how this impacts accessibility or lack of it, persons with disabilities and their lives. I know there are different studies, so you may also want to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Definitely will. Good suggestions.
So the queue being empty, it's left to me to summarize the board feeling, which is, oh, wow.
Oh, thank you.
The philanthropic efforts you've been carrying out since the foundation was founded continue to be amazing for the size of the foundation and especially for its youth. And being able to fold into that all of the other work that's been going on is just a tremendous piece of very impressive work. And I think the board joins me in saying, oh, wow. And we look forward to seeing you continue to do it, because one of the bad things about the setting expectations is we'll continue to hold you to them.
Okay. fair enough.
Thanks again for all the hard work from you and your team. And as my colleagues in Portugal would say, força, keep it going.
Shall do. Thank
Um,
you so much for your attention.
So Renalia, I think you're up next.
Okay, let's talk about strategy. This is a presentation about the Internet Society Foundation strategy. And I want to start by saying, when the foundation was established, it was determined that it would do funding. Sarah had used the word funding. And it has a strategy for funding, which is 5 years until the year 2025, if I'm not mistaken, and also a 10-year financial scenario that goes up to 2030, which we would need to update the assumptions and review with the board again. The foundation is different this year because of the expanded support functions. What we don't have is a strategy that positions the supporting organization for success. That is a gap. And it is an organization strategy that needs to include all of the functions within it, and that is funding or grant giving, training, fundraising, and communications. So can we go to the next slide, please? This is a timeline for developing the next 5-year strategy for the Internet Society Foundation. And it is tied to the development of the Internet Society Foundation, the Internet Society strategy itself. And Sally had presented that timeline this morning. There is a dependency between the development of ISOC strategy and the foundation strategy, because the supporting organization has to align and support what ISOC needs and wants to achieve in the world. And so it's important that in September, when the board meets to develop and define the ISOC strategy, we have absolute clarity on the direction you want ISOC to go, clarity in terms of what success looks like and the focus areas, so that we can take that information and start thinking about how to structure and resource the support capacities in the foundation as an entire supporting organization itself. And so in terms of projection of timeline moving forward, we see that in the first quarter meeting of next year, we would like, Sarah and I and Say and Ilana, who's part of the core strategy development group, would like to come back to the board and say, here's an updated assumption for the financial scenarios for the next 5 years for the supporting organization, not just the philanthropy or the funding part of it. And we would like to ask the board in terms of what is the path forward based on the updated assumption. And from there on, once it's clear what the path forward is for the next 5 years, we can then sit down and figure out what is the strategy for the supporting organization that is aligned with what ISOC wants to achieve. And we hope to have that strategy finalized in September, which would be at the next retreat that you would have. That's the simplified projection in terms of timeline that I would say about the supporting organization. And I would just end there and we can have a discussion about it.
I've been looking at you, Pepper, for like 3 minutes because you keep leaning forward in that way. Like,
Yeah, so we actually had a conversation before. And and this is actually very helpful because we made the organizational change earlier. The strategy development for the new organizational structure, right, creates a gap because we're operating with the strategy that we're wrapping up. And we're going to be developing a new strategy and an action plan to follow that next year. And the question is how to reconcile that at the moment, right? So it's less of to help, Renelia, the staff, the team in the transition, to help provide more of the clarity in terms of what do you do between now and then. And one of the things that we had discussed is and again, it's maybe for a conversation later in the closed session, but questions about how to fill that gap, to help the team, the staff, the management, bridge between the strategy that was created and the strategy that we're going to be developing, or actually approving and working with, Andrew and the team to do that. So it just seemed to me that what popped up is that there's a gap here, right? We did the reorg, and it's working, and I just think there's some things that we may need to do to help that along. That's all.
John?
I'm sorry, so Renali, was that the ask, or is this kind of more of a heads up of, hey, we're gonna need to start thinking about this, and beginning in June, we're gonna get some briefings? And because I would have assumed what we're in right now is we did some things like tactically we're executing on that, and like I'm not sure what guidance we could interject between in this time frame that would be strategic, right? In the sense of, so is what you're asking for like a heads up, hey, you guys got to start thinking about this because we're going to need that 5-year plan to be like relatively articulated once we have ISOC's strategy in place in that September timeframe. So is this just that heads up, or do you have some more immediate strategic ask for us for the next, whatever that is, 4 months or something?
That is the heads up. And what I would
Okay.
love to have is confirmation that it is one strategy for the supporting organization that includes all of the parts, rather than a split strategy that's focused on funding and then the other bits.
So since we're just having a bit of a conversation about this right now, let me just say that I think it's going to take us a bit of time to go from our current view of this, which is really, I think, of the philanthropic organization. And so yes, and we're used to thinking of the philanthropic organization as the ISOC Foundation, and now we're thinking of it as this broader, larger thing. And I think from a strategic perspective, we're still moving through that process of saying, okay, what does it look like to think of the strategy of the whole organization as opposed to 3 different pieces, right? Where we have the philanthropic strategy, we have the fundraising strategy, which is obviously a critical strategy for us. And then we have the supporting organization that that's the body that gets much of the work of the overall society done. So I think we need to work on that. You're absolutely right. And I think one thing we may need to be thinking about in particular is this may need to be strategy at a slightly different level, right? Where I think for the Internet Society, we were like, okay, we need to have the details, but then we expect it to be reasonably broad scale, abstract concepts, build, promote, defend, that we can use to drive these different streams of work. Obviously, if we're going to do that for the foundation, one of those would be give, right? That would be one of our verbs. And I think part of our question is, okay, we've got give, grow, sustain, right? Those would be three verbs we have right now. We have to give, we have to grow our organization and our ability to fund by fundraising, and we have to sustain the operations. Those would be kind of our three verbs at the
No, we're
moment.
done. You just did it. You solved it all.
I don't think
Okay,
we
can
did,
go home now,
right?
right?
I think what we have to do is to figure out whether those are the right verbs and whether that actually is going to drive the. No, this is the start of a discussion that will continue into the new board. And Andrew has had his hand up for a very long time, so he goes first and then the.
Well, I don't know about a very long time, but I do want to point out that we have a closed session later because of the financial discussions. And I want to remind everybody that as a supporting organization, one of the fairly significant issues here is going to be money. And so I think that is one of the things that people need to be thinking about in these terms, because that's actually a big part of like what's going to have to be thought about here, the relative distribution of like what the funds are for and what direction and so on.
Luis?
Yeah, I agree with you, Ted. We should start seeing this as a integral operation. Instead of thinking in three separate entities, okay, they have to live as separate entities, but the strategy must include the three at least. Yes, I may remind that the view from the external auditors is that we should have in every affiliated entity or subsidiary, we should have similar strategies, which not mean identical, but similar. And the way to achieve that is having a single strategy for the whole group. Let's think like that, but it is not a financial group, right?
So there may be more of this that we want to continue in executive session, but I will say, I think at this point, we have no issues with the alignment of any of our organizations with the mission. And we have some learning to do about how the change in operation will allow us to align them strategically instead of tactically. Because I think what you guys have done has been tremendous work in getting this up and running and to make it a going concern with all of the new activities under the ISOC Foundation banner, right? That's been a huge amount of work on everybody's part. And I think the board is very grateful for that work and the breathing room it's given us on a number of axes. We're still up leveling that from the first strategic response to the situation that caused us to make this rebalance to what does this look like in the future? And as these scenarios come in, I'm sure that we will need to continue to reflect on, how the new reality on the ground will affect some of the strategic opportunities here. So I guess I have a question. Is our next, let me look at the, just wondering whether our next thing with the fundraising plan is open to observers. It is. So we'll put that off and we'll take any further discussion of that into the executive session, which will follow the fundraising plan discussion. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. Has Jeff already joined us? Okay. Oh, this was open to observers. He could have been here the whole time.
I see the cast of thousands has been watching this live the whole time.
Hi, Jeff, can you hear us?
I can.
Great. Well, welcome. We have reached the point in our agenda where we're ready to discuss the fundraising plan. So that brings us to having you front and center. Great to have you here.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. I hope the trip in Japan is going well, and both Chrissy and I thank you for the opportunity to talk for a little bit. What we'd like to do is we know that the slide deck itself was included in the board deck. So what we'd like to do, given the fact that we just have a half an hour, is we'd like to hit 3 primary slides and hit on some major ideas and themes, and then give you a chance to ask whatever questions you want so that we leave enough time for that. So given that, I'd like to turn to slide 2. Christy, please. And really what we're looking at when we look at this, and I'm not seeing it on my screen.
It hasn't gone up yet. Okay. So give us a second. We're
No
switching to
problem.
sharing.
There we go. Okay. Thank you, Christy. So the first slide is this. This is a major point that underscores all that we're doing, which is the $10 million is achievable. It is achievable. We have to believe it is achievable, and we have to plan accordingly. And that said, to reach that goal, we have to begin to really diversify and expand our outreach in our fundraising efforts, and then who we're marketing and communicating with. From just within the tech industry, the internet industry itself, to the larger society in which the tech industry and the internet industry operate. We have to begin to branch out and take the ISOC story and what we do, how we do it, and the impact of what we're doing on populations around the globe to a community of funding prospects who don't currently know us. So again, key to making this achievable is the diversity and the expansion of our outreach. That leads to slide number 3, Christy, please. And that is the diversity again, and the expansion is critically important to hitting not just our $10 million, but as close to that in these selected budget categories and these revenue streams as we can get. These were developed last year for this year's budget. Grants coming in at a $5 million price point, organizational membership coming in at 1.2, sponsorships at 1 million, and individual giving at 2.8. I want to draw our attention for just a moment to individual giving, because that is the broad base of donors that don't fall within any one of those other categories, and they're at giving levels from $5, $1, all the way up to major donors who could conceivably give us $10, $20, $30, $50,000. It is that revenue stream that's dealing with individual donors, and that doesn't fall within the other categories. Key to this also, though, is this: the diversity and the expansion gives us the ability, in building out a fundraising program, gives us a sustainability factor. It takes us to a place where we're not just meeting the demands and the needs and the goals of 2023, but we're building the foundation that's going to lead us into 2024, 25, 26, and beyond. It's very important that everything we do today, every effort we enter into for fundraising, doesn't just help us meet our short-term needs, but helps us build a long-term funding model and a foundation for us to continue building on in the future. And then we go to slide number 6. And as we're looking at setting up this program, as we're dealing with some of the challenges internally that have to do with infrastructure, setting up a firm foundation of fundraising in our computer operations, in our tracking of opportunities, celebrating our successes that we have along the way, and understanding those weaknesses that exist within the model, which only come from an understanding and analysis of metrics on a monthly basis. Our keys to success are very definitive. They're very deliberate. They're very, they need to be understandable and attainable measures of success. And to that point, we have these 4 points that are critical to the funding model moving forward. One, we have to begin to parallel contextualize our storytelling. We have to contextualize the story that we're telling both outside the industry by leaning in on who we are and what we do and showing that impact that it's having. We have to run parallel opportunities both inside the industry and outside the industry. Because if we just stay within the community that we're used to working within, we're going to have an enormous challenge, because we're not just developing a culture of giving and a culture of philanthropy, but we're introducing a brand new concept to most of these people. We have just run an appeal to help fund our Nepal project with our individual members. We sent out 32,000 appeals to individual members, 32,000 individual members. Thus far, we've gotten back about 55 responses. And while that may seem low, we're celebrating a success that we didn't have before. We have 39 new donors, non-donors who converted into donors, but it also brought us to the awareness that this community doesn't really understand giving, isn't in the culture of giving, and it's going to take some time to bring them on board. It's going to really take some communication and some cultivation and some stewardship. So we have to simultaneously, again, diversify our donor base by expanding outside our community into the general populace within which we work. Second, we must be more deliberate in our fundraising. We need to increase the number of asks. We need to purposefully meet with people, tell the story, and at the right opportunity, make those asks. And the key to making those asks is not just reaching for the largest number we can reach for, but to bring and engage people in our mission, vision, and values, and at the right opportunity, give them the opportunity to participate on a financial level. As I told the staffs the ISOC staff and the ISOC Foundation staff last Friday and Monday, fundraising, I kind of dispelled a perspective that is widely felt globally, which is fundraising is about money. And I explained to them, as someone who has raised a great deal of money over the years, fundraising is not about money. Fundraising is about people and engaging people deliberately, strategically, consciously in our mission, vision, and values, in what we're doing, who we're doing it for, and the impact we're having. And by engaging them and creating a partnership, if we do that correctly, the money becomes, one, a natural outgrowth of that partnership and that which they want to provide, and two, it becomes longer term than if it's simply a transactional gift. And it's asked for in a respectful way. So we're not asking for large sums of money initially. We're asking them to partner with us at comfort levels that they have, and then continuing to build on that. But we have to be deliberate. We have to make more asks. Last year in our grants program, we asked for 10 grants. I'm accustomed, and the people that work with me are accustomed to asking for 30, 40, 50 grants. To get to $5 million, to a $5 million goal budget line, we have to ask for exponentially larger numbers of opportunities to give. So we have to be deliberate and very focused and very strategic. Second, we have to communicate our fundraising results clearly and regularly. People both inside the organization and outside the organization have to understand where we stand in our goals, how our fundraising efforts are helping to fulfill the programmatic the programs that we're involved in, and the impacts of those programs and being able to fund those opportunities. So we have to communicate clearly and regularly on an ongoing basis And that communication has to be strategically mixed in with appropriate asks at appropriate times. But again, that goes to the cultivation, stewardship of relationships and engaging people in our organization as partners. And three, we have to operationalize. We very much have to operationalize our internal processes and how we're doing fundraising. That goes to the idea and the notion of building a firm foundation of fundraising. We have to operationalize storytelling. We have to put those opportunities out to those programmatic staff and staff around the world who can provide us with the impact stories that we're going to need to tell what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and the effects of what we're doing. And finally, we have to make meaningful contact with donors and prospective donors. That again is based around connection.
Can I ask you to pause for a second? Victor has a question.
Yeah, we're allowed to ask questions midstream, right? Yeah, okay. Do you have an example of a story we are telling?
Nepal. Nepal's a great story that we're telling. We had two communities there that didn't have the internet. We've implemented phase one and connected them initially up, and it's given them the opportunity to not just improve their services to the people that are climbing Mount Everest, but it's been giving them the opportunity to find work on those off-season periods of time when they can't do it. That is a wonderful, extraordinary story and very unique.
Got
we
it.
have stories like that.
So then the follow-up is, so when we've mentioned that story to perspectives, how was the reception thus far? Like, what pieces of that were creating the connections? Or are we still kind of exploring how to tell that story in a manner to create those connections? Because obviously the end result is to entice someone to say, this is so important that we have to fund.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. I can tell a story on I can relate how I used it before I even started with the organization. I was working as a consultant and I spoke to a dear friend of mine in California. She asked about my new position. She asked about the organization, and I shared with her this story. And she said and the way I expressed it was not about how we put an internet community network system in, but what was the effect of putting that community network system in, which was a contextualized approach for her. Because what was of interest to her is what's the impact? And we told the story. I told her the story, and she said to me, okay, come back in the spring and I'm going to make a gift to the Internet Society. This is a brand new donor. So I told that story and I put the humanity side of it first and foremost. And that's what she hooked into. But we've got to lean into as well what we're doing in terms of why we're doing it. And where we sit with folks that are very interested in the technical side, we have to be willing and able to tell that side of the story as well. And those are really the key principles. We have to diversify. We have to expand our approach. We have to expand our approach outside of the community that we're accustomed to working within. And then we have to very deliberately plan and strategize to reach these points of success. And then we have to, when we do hit the opportunity, the success points, we have to celebrate them. We have to enjoy them. We have to recognize that they're a step in the direction, they're a step taking us in the direction that we want to go. There are roles that we've provided to the staff throughout the entire organization that they can be a part of, and ways in which they can support the fundraising efforts. The board can certainly help with that as well. I hope you saw that slide in the deck. We're looking for your help to connect us with people that you know, and that would be interested, may very well be interested and open and willing to have a conversation. Please help us connect with those folks. And additionally, share with us the perspectives and the things that you're hearing outside within the circles and the worlds that you're traveling and working within. You can share that information. If you share that information with us, it helps us refine our approach moving forward. And where you're comfortable, I would love and ask you if you would participate with me at appropriate times in appropriate contexts with fundraising. Sit with me with a donor prospect that you might know. I will be honest, I've made a lot of asks over the years. And oftentimes when someone sits with me in a meeting that they've brought me to, and I make an ask, the donor prospect is giving because of the person sitting next to me, not because I made the ask. And so working in partnership with us can also be extraordinarily valuable in actually conducting a solicitation, connection and conducting a solicitation. So there are those ways that you can help us as well. Christy, do you have anything you'd like to add before we open it up to Q&A? No? Okay. So I will do that. I will open it up for any questions that you might have for either Christy or myself, and we can go from there.
So I have one quick comment, and then Luis, I think, is the first question. And the comment is, I realized that some of the side chat people were saying of like, what was the rate of return for our first individual donation, and maybe some comments about what that happened. But I think we have to recognize this is the first use of a muscle. The very first time we've tried that in this way. So it's like your first push-up is not the most beautiful push-up. You're not building the muscles from the very first time. And I think we have to recognize that it's going to take us some repeated efforts to find the right stories, the right ways to do this. And it's very important that we as a board stay behind this effort and support it, because if we stop exercising the muscle early because we don't see immediate gains, we're never going to see the gains. So I think you might, in fact, be getting some feedback from members of the community of, why are you coming to me for money? You've got a lot of money, all of those things. That's something that we can work together to answer those objections and move on, because we have to keep exercising that muscle. Luis.
Thanks, Jeff. I have two questions. The first one is the continuation of Victor. Yes, you were talking about the story of Nepal. Actually, I got the story of Chepal, who is a Sherpa entrepreneur. And so I want to know how effective it has been, this storytelling, and which other stories you have ready to be placed, because I don't think only the story of we're connecting people because they need to be connected is enough to reach our goals. And that leads me into the second question. The second question is, how are we doing on the fundraising goals? Yes. Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel that we are lagging or leading? Yes. I want to hear something about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are great questions. It's not the only story. We've reached out to staff to provide other stories. We're putting that pool together. It's going to, and I thank you, Ted, for your comments, because we are beginning to exercise a muscle that ISOC hasn't exercised in the past. And what we're really building on right now is a foundation that we're going to continue to grow from. We have, when I got here, we had very few donors, relatively speaking, very small, very narrow, very thin, very, small foundation. We're building that foundation and we're changing the culture. I've learned a lot in the first 12 weeks that I've been here as I've refined the thinking. It's interesting. I consider 39 non-donors converted to donors a huge success, where we haven't been able to draw in individual members in a donation platform before. So I consider that an extraordinary success, and we celebrate that. I will tell you that we're putting those pieces into place to continue to reach out. But the more that I'm reaching out, the more I'm also seeing it's going to take a lot more education and a lot more flexing of the muscle, so to speak, to bring in those within our world, within the ISOC community, bring them into a relationship with us on a donor basis, which is why we're making a concerted and strategic and deliberate effort to reach outside the internet industry pool to begin fundraising, because there's a lot of people who will take to that story and take to our other stories that folks are starting to give us. Somebody told me of a young girl that I also told this story to, a young girl in sub-Saharan Africa who didn't have internet in her village. She got it. She was able to take her school exams, and now college is an opportunity for her that didn't exist before. Again, that's an opportunity to better one's life and give her opportunities she didn't have before. So these stories work, and they work outside, but we have to take the ISOC brand out, introduce people to it, introduce them to what we're doing, the how, what, the how, who, what, where, and why, and share and begin to share that with them. I would love to say that every so often something catches fire. And every so often an idea in a program or an appeal catches fire. More often than not, it takes a little bit more time. Where are we in terms of, which leads me into where are we in terms of our fundraising? We're moving forward. Is it moving as fast as I'd like? In all honesty, no, it's not moving as fast as I would like to be able to get to the 10 million. But there's a lot of challenges. We're building out a sense and an understanding and a culture of philanthropy, both internally and externally with those we meet. We're dealing with the implementation of fundraising infrastructure with the implementation software of Salesforce, which is now estimated to be implemented and available to us to use in the fall. And that helps us track donors, that helps us communicate with prospects, that helps us run a fundraising program. Right now, we're bridging that gap to help us get to that point. We have a culture internally that's hard to fundraise with because they haven't been asked before. And so it's slower going than I would like to see it, or I would hope for it to go, but we are making baby steps. So I
Jeff, we
think
have
in the
another-
context, I mean, let me just say this, within the context of our challenges, and dealing with staff challenges and change of perspective and how they do their job and what the expectations are. All of this plays out within the context. And I think within the context of what we're dealing with in those challenges, we are making headway. We are taking steps forward every single day.
So you have another comment or question from Mohammed? Mohammed?
Yes, partly it has been addressed by Brian in the Slack. Yes, it's important. I have received the emails telling stories about Nepal. Have you ever considered, and I think you must have considered it as well, stories about build and defend, fragmentation project and other projects, that grant making projects that Internet Society is supporting, and also featuring some of the grantees in not just emails, but also launching some of the videos on YouTube and social media projects, so that the stories are not just told, but they are told in different manners.
Yes. Yes. We are working the fundraising team and the marketing, communication, and content teams are working hand in hand to strategically plan how we communicate, what we communicate, and within segmented populations, so that we're telling the right story to the right people and getting the right effect from that stories. So that's all in our planning. We're not just telling one story. It happens to be that we use Nepal to tell a story on an initial ask because we needed to raise money for phase 2 of that project. But we're planning for all areas of the organization and all opportunities to tell stories of impact across the board to those to the folks that they will resonate the most with. And that's part of the planning process. and execution.
Thank you very much. I think one of the questions that's been on the mind of the board since before you came on board is how the relationship to PIR affects your ability to tell the story. And so when you talk to people, when you bring these up, are they looking at the PIR source of funding at all, or is this just off the radar of most of the people you're talking to?
Nobody has brought it up to me. Nobody has brought it up to me. And that for me is one of the easier questions to answer, because what the PIR funding allows us to do is say to a prospect or a donor, everything you donate is going to provide services to those that we're doing the work for. It's not keeping our lights on. It's not paying salaries. It's not keeping that operational door open, so to speak, because they're covering it. And so everything we raise from donors goes towards program support, program implementation, and program support in all areas of the organization. But thus far, nobody has asked me. The other thing that has come up internally as a potential objection, but again, it hasn't come up. And it didn't come up to me, interestingly enough, at Apricot when I was in Manila at the conference. But even with the PIR funding, it doesn't fund everything we want or are capable, able, and need to be doing. It is an extraordinary blessing and support to us, but it doesn't fulfill everything we're able, capable, and need to be doing in this sphere of society. And so when you look at it that way, coupled with, everything they're giving, we ask them for is going towards support, it's a really strong case. It really kind of diffuses the PIR issue.
Thanks. That is extraordinarily different than what I would have expected. So having falsifying data is always useful. I think our expectation has been that it was a big deal, and if you're able to turn it into a positive, that this means that the administrative costs are also covered, and then any donation goes to a specific program. That's indeed a more powerful story than I was expecting. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? George?
I think these are interesting points that were raised. I was commenting to Lewis earlier that we're very good at telling technical stories. Well, we can say that we've trained 13,000 people and we've done this and that and so on, but it's sort of like an echo of the fragmentation discussion. We're not very good at telling stories about what this has done for people's lives because we assume it. And I think that there's a point here that maybe the reorientation of the storytelling may get us places that we have not been able to get before. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful example. I went back and talked to somebody about an effort at the IETF called WebRTC. And even before the RFCs were published, it was in 1 billion different endpoints, enabling people to use browsers to do video conferencing that sometime previously had required a physical connection. And we were going through that. And the person that was talking to me said, I wonder who the first person was using WebRTC to sing happy birthday. And it was like, that's such a different way of thinking about it. Such a more powerful way of saying, what did this enable than this is in, Chrome and Firefox and all of these other things where it's latent. And that question of who was the first person to sing happy birthday using WebRTC is the kind of story we're looking for. How do we tell the story of the impact on people's lives? And I think that's something that, again, it's a muscle we don't necessarily have, where many of us technologists or civil society or from other parts of the industry where that almost ethnographic view of the impact of the internet isn't natural to us. But I think we need to find that, because it's that view that's going to make for the powerful stories we need to carry the effort forward.
This is,
Sagarika and then Robert.
this is for Christine. Like, do you have a tool kind of a thing to do the storytelling? Because we board members are not good at storytelling. If we want to talk to donors kind of people. So if you have a prepared things, so then we can share and we can talk later, right?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everybody. Appreciate you having me here today. So we have a few stories in our story bank that we can absolutely share, sort of cheat sheet style if you need it, back pocket. What we're trying to do in what was in the slide is operationalize it so we can have more stories in our library. So we have a form. I know it sounds weird as stories in form, but we do have a form that we ask people for just like 4 questions. And then, so that way we can catalog everything and then we can go back and say, okay, is this a story? What was the impact? Did it have impact now, or what could the impact be in the future? Who's the point of contact there on site that we can perhaps contact in the future? So we have, it's a very simple methodology right now, but we're to use the muscle analogy, we're just flexing our first muscle here. But in terms of some stories for you all, for the board, we can definitely package up a few and send over to you. They're all over our website, but we've got a very big website, so we can package some up and send them.
Pepper?
So I just want to, thanks, Jeff. I love your optimism. And I think that shifting the conversation to the stories that we tell that are the compelling ones about why people should care about the internet makes complete sense. And it resonates also with, the conversation we had earlier about some of these other issues. And, it's the translating the, sort of cool analytical approach that we typically take into passion. And I think that's great. And that also, Sarah, is what you've done with the philanthropy side of the foundation. And I think it makes a huge difference. So thanks. And I appreciate your optimism. I hope it's well-founded.
John?
Yeah. Hi, Jeff. We should talk sometime soon, as I think you know. But one question I do have about the inspirational stories and storytelling is, do you think the positive message or the negative message is more effective? In other words, do you think inspiring people with what we've accomplished and, stories about Nepal and things like that are more effective for fundraising than terrifying people with the things that are going to happen if we are unable to intervene in given places? And I mean, it's like a political campaign, right? How negative are you willing to go?
I can jump in here because I do have a fairly strong point of view. Positivity all the way. We want to lead with hearts and minds, and the scare tactic, the fear factor, that's everywhere. And there's a lot of clutter to break through. And Internet Society's tone of voice is not one of fear factor. It's one of positivity and optimism. So that's the tone that we want to lead with. It's positivity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would also just add, John, not to counter what Chrissy said, but you asked in terms of fundraising. I think positive is always the way to go. I think that there are moments and there are opportunities. There are moments where an organization needs to take the negative message to the public. But it's like crying wolf. We've got to be very strategic and deliberate about when we do it and how we do it. We don't want all of our funding, all of our communicating, all of our relationship building to be built upon the negative. And I, at least from my experience, I raise a lot more money with the positive. Now you can tell the story of the need that exists without it being framed in a negative way and taking that positive approach to life change.
It just hits this little more. When we say negative, obviously it isn't like a political campaign, but getting people to understand the crisis and the potential implications not just for their lives, but for the lives of people who are much less fortunate than anyone who's part of the conversation we're having at the moment, right? Like, so even to that degree, you believe it's better to take the positive message, because if we're looking, you know, again, at attracting the kind of social media attention that I believe, you know, were we to look for a vast diversity of sources of funding, I think, you know, unfortunately, a great deal of research has demonstrated that the virality of these sorts of things tends to be far more effective when we're talking about a crisis than about like sunshine and unicorns.
Well, you use a very important word there, crisis. And there are times when you do crisis fundraising. The problem is you can't build a whole program around crisis fundraising. Crisis fundraising is one of those things that you can do every couple of, you know, assuming you don't have a natural crisis every year. You have to use
We
it.
do, by the way, but
and as do I here in Houston these days. It feels like we're doing crisis fundraising every year now. But we have to be, but I think it's how we frame it. It's not that there isn't a need, but there's a fine line between having a need and a critical need and us being in crisis. And how we frame it and how we ride that line that exists between those two. And it is a very fine line between crisis fundraising and raising funding for a need to continue to better people's lives around the globe who don't have the internet and don't have that, and protect the internet, defend the internet. And, you know, positive works, negative works, but it's a momentary work. And it comes, and we have to use it sparingly. I don't like to build a whole program around it. I don't think it doesn't provide sustainability.
Barry?
Yeah, it's, I guess the angle I'm thinking is that the internet is not like puppies. You know, you have an adopt a puppy thing, and what you see, there's always the picture of the sad puppy, not the happy puppy who had gotten adopted, but the sad one who hasn't been yet until you come in and take care of it. This is different. And to go with what Jeff's saying, how you frame it, is the response to John is that you put the negative in a positive way. It's you show the opportunity that you gave somebody that they didn't have before, that they wouldn't have had without it. And that's the negative part that's framed positively, rather than saying, oh, all of these people in Africa can't do what they want to do because we're not able to.
so what I just heard you say is that we already solved the problem, which is awesome. There was a problem.
We've solved the problem for
addressed it.
some of these
Okay.
people, but here's other people who have the same need and you can help them too.
If I can also just kind of give an idea here, because I hear this and it's coming back to me. I also explained to the staff, it's interesting. Fundraising is not about money, and I'm a firm believer of that. And second, fundraising and development work in the sense of fundraising is a contextualized science. There's very few common threads that run throughout the industry of fundraising. You contextualize your approach, your story you tell, how you ask. You contextualize based on who you're meeting with, what their needs are, what their interests are, what it is they're hoping to accomplish. So all of this plays into that, and which makes for the idea that there isn't one solid case that's true for all opportunities. We have to look at the opportunity and who we're meeting with and find out where the best approach is.
Yeah, I mean, what I take away from that is you are really looking at building bespoke relationships with hopefully a large set, you know, but not millions, right? You're looking at building relationships with a discrete set of people in the long term that believe in the mission and are going to support us on those grounds. And that is kind of your strategy for getting us to 10 million. Is that correct?
No, you're right on the first part. On the second part, I'm a firm believer as a professional fundraiser that today's sustainability is built on the many, not the few.
Precisely, yes.
And so I want a donor base that's for the benefit of ISOC and ISOC Foundation. For ISOC, I want a donor base that's as large as we can get. My first goal is 100,000 donors. My second goal would be 250,000, and just to continue growing it, because it means that ISOC is well situated to continue the work we're here to do for a lot longer than I'm going to be around. And my goal is always to build this sustainable.
How does that align with the relationship building, customizing to the, so this is, you segment it out in terms of the relationships you build, or? I'm sorry to grill you. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I believe that we're all building relationships. And the interesting part about it is, while we may not all be fundraisers asking for money, we're all development professionals cultivating and stewarding relationships that connect people to us or push people away. And there are those times when we meet with people and we don't connect, and they don't connect with the organization. But we all have that. And it's to be so my hope is that I help to lift the conscious awareness of how we're meeting with people and trying to connect them to us in whatever capacity works for them. Again, I would love to see as large a donor base as possible for the benefit of the organization.
I think the board as a whole would be extraordinarily relieved by a largest donor base, as you can imagine, because it sounds like you can imagine pretty big ones, and that would be great indeed. I will say one thing that's also, I think, been problematic for us in the past is sparking the imagination of the people we talk to about what it's like to be one of the people who's still unconnected. I would wager everybody in this room has at least 2 devices, maybe 3 devices that are connected even as we speak. You will go home to places with additional devices, and sometimes many additional devices. We are used to, at this point, treating the internet like oxygen. It's always around us, and we thrive and grow with it without thinking. We don't have to think, where's our next source of oxygen? And that's not the case for the people we're still trying to connect, and it's not the case for the people we're trying to defend. And I think part of our problem in reaching a donor base is getting them to imagine that life without the internet for long enough so that they can see why it's worth their $10 a month or $5 a month or whatever makes a broad-based thing. And we may actually think about a campaign at some point in the future of give up the internet for a day. And if you can't do it, give us $1 for every hour you didn't make it. You know, that kind of thing where somebody says, I didn't make it past breakfast, here's your 20. You know, that kind of thing would be both valuable as an educational exercise in making that connection and a little bit of money along the way. And I think that's the kind of segmenting that Jeff is talking about, where we don't have to build the relationship one by one. We have to spark the imagination in different audiences in different ways.
As you were saying that, I saw the door opener come up on the screen, and I thought it was talking about one of those devices that I have that's on the internet.
Any other comments for Jeff other than the usual? We're very happy to have you here with us doing this work. We're very much looking forward to your success. And if there's anything we can do, let us know.
Well, and to that point, thank you, Ted. And thank you all. I love being here, and it's a real privilege to be part of the organization and doing this work with you. I will make the same offer to all of you that I'm making to the staff and the team here internally, which is, if you hit questions and you want to know how to take that story and you want to know how to try to connect the donor, please feel free to reach out. I'm preparing a follow-up email from our meetings. I will send to you as well, so you have all my contact channels and you have those tools. But I want you to know that we're here. You're not alone. I'm happy to help you in any way I possibly can to feel most comfortable about taking those stories to people, how to connect with them, so forth. As are my colleagues in Christy and her team. as well in terms of what they're doing and how it's all meshing together. So please know we're here to help you as much as we need your help. And you just need to let us know that you need that, and we'll be happy to be there. So thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. And we're going to take a short break now. For those of you who've been staying up for this, we really appreciate that. We will come back at 20 past the hour. Thanks, everyone. I think we actually will return into closed session because we're getting the finance reports. So for the people in the room, come back at 20 past the hour, or if you're part of the closed session, come back. Yes, we will return to open session later. Thanks, everyone. Thanks very much to Say Park and Laura Thompson for the review of the Finance Committee. And thanks indeed to Sarah, Renalia, and Jeff for the previous reports. Is there any other business for the good of the order? Seeing none, I'd like to close the meeting by thanking everybody who's gone through this rebalancing effort, whether on the ISOC side, but especially on the foundation side, because in addition to the philanthropic mission that they've had since they were founded, they've taken on the mission of supporting the mission of the Internet Society, that the Internet be for everyone, in a new way. And we really appreciate the extent to which the leadership and the staff have come together to recognize that no matter where you are in the organization, you are delivering that same mission. The board is very much committed to the Internet being for everyone, remaining the core guiding principle for all the parts of the Internet Society, whether they be staff organizations, chapters, the OMAC, or individual members. We see that as our North Star. And we are very, very happy to see the extent to which the organization has been able to change its structure without losing sight of that mission. And I think the board joins me in thanking the organization for that and congratulating you on that success. Thank you very much. And with that, we are adjourned.